Welcome to the home dojo. Just like everybody else, we're stuck inside here, and my wife and I are going to work on a lesson today for stances. So stances are really the most important part of your training. Our hands know how to move, but our legs have to be taught. Oftentimes when you teach a new technique like a block, somebody might have trouble with a block for a while, but eventually they figure that out, and especially by the time they get to like their intermediate range, orange or purple. But stances just continue to be the overall developmental consistent thing throughout. Now when I talked to a blue belt this morning, I asked him what's the most important thing that you need to do, and he said stances. So I'm drilling this into everybody, and I want to remind everyone that this is such an important thing. I'm going to break down what the stances are, how we move from stance to stance, where the stances are strong, where the stances are weak, and then when we use different stances throughout. So I'm going to start with the first stance, which is our ready stance. So a ready stance is typically about here. Now sometimes the feet are completely together. This is fine. Sometimes we're at more of a rest or relaxed position, and that would be a ready stance. So from here, this is typically how we begin a bow. How else do we use a ready stance? Well, we don't really. It's more of an attention stance. It's a focusing position. So you think about the way you might sit and try to sit at attention when someone's talking to you and explaining something. Well, a ready stance gives us that skill. And if we're standing there listening to our instructor or listening to our person in class, then we're gaining something from that stance, even though it's not structurally the strongest position. Ready stance is also called hachichidachi. That is the Japanese term for ready stance. Hachichidachi, ready stance. Okay? When I go from that position into a more wider position, I'm going to bend my knees and push out. That is called a horse stance. So when I'm in a horse stance position, my feet are apart and I'm sinking down. I use this stance quite a bit in my forms. We're going to work on doing things that are strong from side to side from that horse stance position. The horse stance in Japanese is kibidachi. Hands are pulled in, I sink down low, and that's my horse stance. From that position, if I take one leg and I slide through into a forward position, this is what's called a front stance or a front leaning stance. I'm trying to put my weight onto my front leg, and I'm using this to drive forward. You may notice from a previous lesson the different ways that we transitioned in front stances. We talked about pushing, posting, and pivoting. But I'm going to go from here and try to just drive in for now and see if I can maintain that good strong front stance. You'll notice from the side where my knee is positioned. Oftentimes in class I will ask people how many toes they have. The reason I ask that question is if I can look down and see my feet and see my toes, my stance is not low enough and I'm not forward enough. If I drive forward and push, my toes are covered by my knee. One thing to caution, don't go too far. If you end up pushing your knee too far beyond your toes, you could actually do some damage to the front of the knee. You're going to be stretching out the tendon underneath the knee, so you don't really want to go too far with that. So that is your front stance. From here, if I draw my foot back and I sink onto my back leg, this is my cat stance. By the way, the front stance is called zenkutsudachi. So when I'm leaning forward, there's my zenkutsudachi or front stance. From here, I draw back, I'm in a cat stance position. My hips are forward, my shoulders are forward, all my weight is on my back leg. Now there are places where we use this within forms, but most of the time when you see a cat stance, it is used as a transition. If I'm moving from this side, and then I'm shifting to this side, and then I'm sliding in, that's my cat stance position. Weight is on the back, front leg is free to move. The name of the cat stance is probably the longest one, which is why we always use the English word cat stance, but it is neko achidachi. 2 words plus dachi, which is stance. Now from here, I'm going to shift my back leg out so that it's at this angle. I'm going to slide my front leg forward, and now I'm leaning back over my back leg. I'll turn to the side so you can see it. Here's my back stance position. So from the back stance from here, I'm leaning back. This is a back stance. Most of the weight is on the front. Now if I look down from here, I can see the toes of my front foot. I cannot see the toes of my back foot, so that's how I know this knee has most of my weight. The toes in the front foot, no big deal, as long as you don't straighten your leg. Oftentimes people, in trying to make this work, Lean back too far. Now my knees bent too much. My front leg's straight. If somebody kicks me in the leg, I'm going to have a broken leg from there. The back stance position from here is called kokutsudachi. So kokutsudachi, the weight is back. All right, back into here. What is this stance called? Ready stance. What is the Japanese word for ready stance? Hachichidachi. We drop down. What is this stance called? It's called horse stance. What's the Japanese word for horse stance? Kibadachi. I slide into a right leg or left leg forward position. Front leg is bent the most. My weight is forward. What is the name of this stance? Front stance. From this position, I'm down here. Oh, what is the Japanese word or Japanese name for the front stance? It's Zenkutsudachi. From there, I take this foot, draw it back. I sink over to my back leg. This is called cat stance. From there, my cat stance, if I switch feet, the other leg comes up. What is the Japanese word for cat stance? This is the longer one, remember. Neko achidachi. Cat stance. I slide my front foot forward, lean back over my back leg, and then I have what is called a back stance. Back stance, Japanese word for back stance is kokutsudachi. And then we're back up. So we're going to do a quick drill to practice through those. I'm going to go through them. I want you to follow along with me as we do them. I'll say them, and then just follow along. So we're going to start with ready stance. Say ready stance. Horse stance. Front stance. Cat stance. Back stance. And back to ready stance. Now I don't care which foot you put forward for front stance or back stance. Really doesn't matter. Just make sure when you put your foot forward, the one that's in front, if it has the weight on it, that's your front stance. If the back leg has all the weight on it, it's a back stance. Now that's not the only difference. So oftentimes we're making that correction, and I'll show you from the front so you can see it. This is a front stance. All right, very good. This is a bad back stance. And the reason it's bad is all that space in there. Okay, a back stance should be closed from the front. So what letter do you see? L. That's a back stance. From here, feet are going slightly out at different angles. If they connect somewhere in the back, what letter do they make? That's a V. It's at an angle, but it's still a V. So if I take my front stance and I shift back, it's not a back stance. It's just a bad back stance or a bad front stance. So what I have to do is slide my back foot across so they're in a straight line. That's my back stance. Okay, same thing goes. If I'm in a back stance and then I just turn, am I now in a front stance? No. I'm in a narrow front stance, but I'm going to get knocked over from either side. So if I'm in a back stance, I need to widen that stance out, turn my hips, turn my shoulders, and then I end up in a front stance. Okay, let's drill them again. I'm going to say it again. Do them with me. This time, we'll do the English version first, and then we'll try the Japanese version. Ready stance. Horse stance. Front stance. Cat stance. Back stance. Okay. Now, I'm going to do the stance. Do the stance with me if you can. I want you to say it. So this is, I'm assuming I can hear you. So let's hear you at home. Ready? What is this called? Say it nice and loud. What's that one? Good. Stance. And what is that? Back stance. Correct. Good. Come back up. All right. So those are our 5 basic stances. Let's do it again. Let's try it this time using the Japanese words. We have time to be at home. We're doing schoolwork at home. Let's try to learn something new. The word dachi, D-A-C-H-I, D-A-C-H-I. Dachi is your stance. and then the other words have to do with the positioning forward, back, side to side. Now I will say, I did not study Japanese. I learned the stances as I learned them from my instructor and done a little bit of research on some of that, but the names are not as important. But sometimes it helps to know a little bit more. If you're talking to someone who does Shotokan karate, that's a Japanese style of karate, and they may refer to something as a kibidachi, which means, again, do you remember? Horse stance. So if you get the horse stance position and everyone says, well, everyone get into a kibidachi, and you know to drop to that horse stance, then you don't have to look around and see what other people are doing. So sometimes it just helps to know a little bit more information. Is it necessary for being a good martial artist? Absolutely not. But is it helpful for being a more informed martial artist? A smarter martial artist? Yeah, maybe. So let's go through them again. I'll say them the first time. Say them with me. Hachichidachi. 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 Say it. Good. Now we're going to drop down. Kibadachi. 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 Say it. I slide forward. Zenkutsadachi. Zenkutsadachi. Say it again. Zenkutsadachi. Now you say it. Now I'm going to slide back. This is our cat stance position. Neko achi dachi. Neko achi dachi. Neko achi dachi. You say it. Good. And our final one, sliding forward and dropping back, turning and putting my weight onto my back leg. We know it's a back stance now. Kokutsadachi. 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 Say it. And then I'm going to come back up. Now I'm going to go through it. See if you can remember any of them. I'm going to say it again for you. Hachichidachi, Kibadachi, Zenkutsadachi, Nekoachidachi, and Kokutsadachi. What is this? Think about it. Okay. Remember the word for stance. Start with that. What is this one? Now I slide back. This is the tough one. Much easier to say cat stance. What's the Japanese word? I'm going to pivot out. What do we call this? There we go. Come back up. Okay? Now I'm going to go at random. Okay? We're going to go back to just calling them out as we do them. Ready stance? Horse stance. Back stance. Front stance. Cat stance. Ready stance. Horse stance. Front stance. I notice I switched legs. Good. I want to work on both sides. Back stance. Ready stance. Cat stance. Ready stance. Horse stance. Cat stance. Front stance. And back. I'm going to go a little slower. This time you say them as we do them. If it's hard to keep up, you may want to just start by saying them, and then you can go back and say it, do them with me. All right, ready? That was fast, but see if you can get all those names in there. Let's go through the names again one more time. Say them with me. Ready stance. Horse stance. Front stance. Cat stance. Back stance. We'll try the Japanese names. What is ready stance? Hachichidachi. What is horse stance? Kibadachi. Front stance. Zenkutsadachi. Cat stance, Neko Achidachi. And back stance, Kokutsadachi. All right, that was good. So we have a good understanding of what the stances look like and how they work. Now we're going to go through individually and talk about each stance and how they work and how they happen to help us with other moves in our martial arts curriculum.